grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on this beast from New Jersey who will be participating in the Reach Rumble this upcoming September. Frank, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Frank Allen. I've been lifting for about forever, since about 13. For football mostly, and then after I got out of the Army, I started taking powerlifting a little bit more seriously because it's like, hey, if I was going to do it, then now's the time to do it because, I'm not getting any younger. So you got that 30 to 40 range, and then, hang it up and lose the weight and get all healthy and all that.
Yeah, so I think when I first saw you on the scene, it was your 1,000-pound Mars bar squat, and I was like, that's just an insane lift to perform on that sort of bar. But after looking at it a little bit, it seems like you seem to get more out of that. So I kind of wanted to talk about that first, about what makes you think that bar has a much higher translation for you.
I wouldn't say it's so much that I want to use these bars, like the Mars bar a lot and the SSB a lot. With getting older and with my size, I've noticed that my shoulder mobility has gone away. And the more that I use those bars, I feel like I can make better progress on my bench. It was like this for a while. This last meet, not as much, where it's like I can train bench, get it up to 640. I've done 635 before the other one, and then just take whatever you can get afterwards. But yeah, it's like I might need to reevaluate that a little bit. There also it takes a lot less time to do for me. It's like, even if I want to squat low bar, it's still 30, 40 minutes of warming up the shoulders, getting under the bar. So sometimes it's just like, hey, the bar's open, let's just get in, get out, and it takes 30 minutes, 40 minutes to warm up to a top single and get out of there versus, having to be there for, another 30, 40 minutes just warming up. So
yeah, I feel like that's something that a lot of the pretty much 275 plus, a lot of the issues with squatting, especially low bar, is like the shoulder mobility, and using bars like that can definitely help, even if it's just a bow bar.
Yep, and one of the things you see with this meet coming up, I know ED, before he dropped out, was talking about that, hey, getting under a power bar. I think Craig was talking about that too. Just a number of these bigger, heavier guys, hey, getting under a power bar, it's it's not fun when you're 350. Unless you keep that mobility. I used to have that mobility, but I lost it somewhere, and I probably try to get it back a bit. But I've been trying to figure out which stretch really works the best, and been hit or miss. Hasn't really found that one golden one to keep it mobile yet.
Yeah. And another thing that I was kind of wondering too is, after looking at open powerlifting, I saw that you only have a few meets under your belt, but you kind of came out onto the scene with just a monster total. So you said you've been training for a long time. So maybe what were some of the reasons that I guess took you so long to get onto the platform?
Well, I mean, it's funny that the USAPL messed this up, and I actually have a number from 2013. My first meet was one to qualify for USAPL Collegiate Nationals in 2013, and then Collegiate Nationals 2013. I took 5th overall in single ply, and that was at 120, which I mean isn't a great weight class for. I'm 6'4", so and then we had the. I came off of football, and we had the IOCT, which is this indoor obstacle course we have to do to pass. And we had the APFT coming up through training for all that kind of stuff, which is different than powerlifting training. But I do have that number from way back in 2013. And prior to that, I was into training heavy style, because we had the football coaches we had growing up. One was a former Mr. New Jersey. I think he was 2 or 3 times Mr. New Jersey. This guy, Coach Stefanoni. And then we had another guy that I never found his numbers on open powerlifting, because it was a long time ago, and I couldn't remember what his real full name was. That now that I've gotten older, but he supposedly did a 900 rep squat, a 800 deadlift. He said he tore his pec trying to bench the bench record at the time at 6'11". So and this is the 1980s or 1970s or something. And that's kind of where I got my start into powerlifting style training. and then that platform in 2013. But then there was that big gap because I graduated from school from West Point, and then you go into the army, and then it's like, hey, I went to the 101st, and the first thing like they're telling you is like, oh, you got to go to air assault school, you got to get good at this 4x36, and I was never a big runner, so squatting and running for me never really matched up. So it's like, hey, I'm not going to get rid of my career to do powerlifting. And then I finally decided to get out of the army after 8 years. I got out in 2020, and I'm like, hey, if I'm going to do this powerlifting thing or try to do strongman or something like that, then it's got to be now. So you're only getting older.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of one of the prime examples of just like people out there who have insane amounts of strength that if they just don't have the opportunity or the time, they'll never step on the
Mhm.
platform, and people will just never know just how strong some of these people were.
Oh yeah, there's some of these kids that I played football with. That, I mean, even Army at a school that's not like a tier one D1 school uh, for football. It's like you just imagine kind of the freaks that they have at Alabama. Like we had a guy that would front squat like 500 pounds was no problem for him. 5x5 with 405 kind of deals. Like he probably would have squatted 1,000 if he wanted to. It's just like one of those things. It's like, hey, he did football, then went in the army, so it's like that's what his life was. So it's not like he could just jump into powerlifting. I think powerlifting, if it's growing, with like the numbers that we see now are like good, but it's not going to be anything if we start getting like those freaks that come out of like the south.
Yeah, and for me, I'm lucky enough to have a job now to where powerlifting is very manageable, very balanced, and I can
Mhm,
pretty much do it as a full time hobby. And I think for obviously like military and things like that, you have other obligations to do. But
mhm.
during your time of football, maybe what were some of the trainings that you were doing that were maybe beneficial to giving you the strength that you had, or kind of you think that were affecting your strength?
Um, some of the stuff for football, like I always had a good bench. So like bench pressing all helps for football. It's like I was a lineman, so that's pretty one-to-one transfer. You push forward and pass blocking, all that. I noticed front squatting helped a lot with football more than probably back squatting for the way that we played. Because we did a lot of run blocking, so that position is more of a front squat. It's like it's good to have like a strong back squat, but probably front squatting not as much. I mean, probably more carryover. We did a lot of cleans too, so like things like that, and all that kind of helped with being able to um, figure out like my own training style. I guess later in life, like hey, you've been exposed to all this kind of stuff, and you've already figured out kind of what works for you going forward. It's like it seems like what works for me is like a lot of heavy stuff, and then you're back off with like a lot of machine work.
Yeah, and for me, I think it was kind of similar. Like it was a lot of benching, a lot of cleans. Obviously, as a D lineman, it's kind of same things that O lineman. That pressing movement to like separate a block and things like that definitely are one to one translations. And for me personally, like maintaining or gaining weight during the football season was my biggest crutch, and it was
Mhm,
severely affecting my bench. But I didn't do my first meet until I believe actually it was I think fall of 2020. So like right at the like end of the initial like COVID thing, and it was just a push pull. And then I hopped into my first full power meet in February of 2021, and trying to kind of balance. At the time, I was like writing my own programs, trying to peak myself. I didn't really know
mhm.
much about that, and I was trying to balance doing both college wrestling, football, and engineering
Oh,
schools.
wrestling too, man. That's
Yeah, so it was kind of a tough time for me, and I was still doing pretty well. Like I wasn't terribly weak, but now that I've been out of like collegiate sports for a year, like the strength has just gone so significantly higher being sports specific like
mhm.
that.
Yeah, that's the wrestling, man. That's the most brutal one. I did that in high school, but I had to give it up my junior year because I knew I was going to go to football for college, and man, I think I was like 275 going into the wrestling season, and just through practice alone, I wasn't trying to lose weight. I got down to like 240, and I'm like, I can't do this my senior year. If I'm going to go visit schools and step on scales, they're like, oh, you're an offensive tackle weighing what 250 pounds. Yeah, get out of here with this. So I feel you there when you're trying to do wrestling and then football and then do your training yourself too, man.
Yeah, and funny enough for me, when I went to go visit, I met the football coach, and I was like, "Oh, you guys have wrestling too?" So he sent me down to the wrestling office, and I was like, "Hey, I kind of want to wrestle here." So I kind of signed myself up for that torture. But I definitely do miss being in wrestling shape. I wish I could be in that shape at
Oh
260,
yeah.
but um, yeah, it was definitely a whole different style of training and something that definitely obviously gave me a good base in athleticism, but just that extra strength from just staying under a bar more often and avoiding injuries too was the biggest.
Yeah, it's definitely wrestling is definitely one if you want to go sports, especially when you're young. I think right because I first started wrestling when I was 5. I did it from like 5 to 7. I think is when I got burnout. 'Cause, like we'd start practice and you're running for 30 minutes. Like we had a pretty good team. Like we had this guy Chris Noddy who went to JUCO and he was like 133 and 4. We had a guy, this Adam Cooney. I think he won nationals his senior year in high school, and then he wrestled at University of Penn. He was like behind the number 3 heavyweight at the time. But like so we had like a really good young kid programs. But that caveat to that is like you're going to get burnt out pretty quick if you're going that hard. But like that young base that you learn from wrestling is good for football and stuff on the top end. Maybe not so much for powerlifting. Maybe a little bit with mobility would be a great thing, like your hips and all that, knowing how to like stand and all that. But that's not so much the strength aspect because I think it's a little bit too anaerobic.
Yeah, and for me, I didn't start wrestling till my sophomore year of high school, and I did it for football. And I
Mhm.
wrestled at 220 those 3 years. But when you go to college, it's either 197 or heavyweight, and I wanted to be around 240 for football, so I would end up wrestling at heavyweight at like 225, 230, and just facing kids that were 285 with abs, and
Mhm.
it was just not a fun time.
Feel you there.
So I know you have the Reach Rumble coming up. I wanted to kind of hear what maybe your strategy was, kind of going into that with the specific rules and the more I guess strict standards.
I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter because I'm a USAPL lifter, so I don't think they're going to be any stricter than the USAPL is going to be. And in my last meet, we even had a jury in the last meet, and I got we're not going to have a jury, so it's going to be a little bit easier. Yeah, they got my last one of my only deadlift that I kind of had was knocked out, and there's like I looked at the film too. It's like it's coming out of my hands, but sometimes like it'll roll and I'll hold it, and sometimes it'll roll and it will fall. So like, but I won't know that because we're gonna have we he got the down command. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna be any worse than that. The only interesting thing is I haven't got a chance to work on the Cerberus bar, but I don't think it's going to be a problem because I mean I've trained on a bunch of them, and it seems like if the bar is new, then it's not you're not going to have to worry about the whip too much. If it's like a used older bar, that's where things start becoming a problem for squats, and then obviously it's not going to matter too much for bench and deadlift. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages that probably you have over some of the other lifters of being in the USAPL with the sometimes overly strict standards, I would say, and
mhm,
just the combo rack and the power bar and just things like that. That definitely having the experience in that is definitely a leg up in this sort of competition.
mhm. And it's like people say like overly strict, but like you got to think like coming from, especially you come from the football background too. Like how many times has a ref been called you for holding? And it's like there's ones on this game that I've done like way worse holding, and they didn't call me, and then they called you for that little one. So it's like it's like the refs are going to get you sometimes. Sometimes you get it in your favor. It's like in the end of the day, it's just like if you perform to like above the standard, then you'll have to worry about it.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I thought if you were part of the USAPL, you weren't allowed to compete in other federations.
So that's like the whole split between the USAPL and the IPF recently. I'm pretty sure, and if they turn me down, then that's fine. Whatever, they can kick me out. I don't. That doesn't really matter too much to me. I live mostly for fun, and it's not really that big a deal if they kick me out of the USAPL. But it seems that this talking with like a Lorenzo Barnes, I think I've cleared it through him. He works at like the national office. It's just like, hey, now that we've split, you can go off and do these and come back, as long as passing your out of state testing and all that kind of stuff. So, it's not really a worry.
So let's go into your training a little bit. Maybe tell us about like what your split looks like. Maybe the I guess style of training you kind of perform.
So I always kind of, back in the day when I first started training, we didn't really have that much information. Like you had to piece it together from like bodybuilding.com. What else was there? Westside Barbell was the one that seemed to have like the most information out there, and that's kind of where I based my training around. And a lot of what I do now just is kind of modeled a little bit off of that with the history of the military kind of dictating how you can train certain days. So like, I'm not worried if I have to, change up a day or it's not going to be like a hey, it's like I was going to do max effort squat today. It's like I'm not really feeling it, so we're going to pivot to something else and maybe do that another day because I've just been used to that so many years where it's like, hey, you got a ruck march today, or all of a sudden the colonel decides that you're going to go on a 7 mile run with him this morning. It's like you're not going to be training hard that afternoon. So it's like I've been used to that. So I kind of just follow that. Hey, if I feel well, we're going to try to do a max effort movement on Saturday, usually, which is like an upper and lower. I'll do both on the same day, so I don't have to go over Philly twice. And then on my secondary days, it'll be like a dynamic effort slash repetition effort. But I usually like will do kind of like how Dave Tate would talk about this. Like even if it was a repetition effort day, they'll have days where they still go high and go heavy for like a single, and then come down and do their rep work afterwards. So I've done stuff like that a lot of times, and it seems to be working pretty good. You know, it, the 1070s kind of speaks for itself. So it's like, hey, if people say something, I've talked to some of the people that I work train with. It's like, oh, maybe if you got a coach, you could do a little better. It's like, yeah, if I got a coach and you got to pay for a coach and you got to follow that program, and it's like this is working well enough. So just train for fun too anyway. So it's like a lot of times it comes down to what do I want to do that day too. So it's like it's not like, hey, I'm not really feeling that movement too. Even if I'm not like, even if I'm feeling okay, it's like I wasn't feeling like squatting. Or if you go in there and all the bars are all the cages and all the racks are taken, it's like, oh, I guess like I'm deadlifting. So you know.
Yeah, and I do think that obviously plenty of people do benefit from a coach, but someone at that level and someone who's doing it in kind of the way you're doing it, I don't think necessarily it's something that's needed with, like you
Yeah.
said, it's clearly showing on its own.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. Like this level that I could probably do better with a coach, but like how much better and how much time off do you have to train change to, or how much time do you have to take off to adjust to a different style of training? That would be like a big one. To like you're pivoting to doing a lot of this volume, long accumulation blocks and all that. So it's like it's like is it really worth it at this time? So that kind of like that's kind of where I sit. Is this? It's like I'm not gonna. I don't know how much farther I can go with this. So it's like how much heavier and how much higher of a total can you get to get more things out of powerlifting, and I don't know. So it's like,
Yeah, I think like you're saying, it's kind of like where's your ceiling at? When's like the I guess the end game looking like for you? And at this
mhm.
point, it's kind of like it's been working so much this far. At this point, it's almost not worth the time and investment to kind of like you said pivot your whole momentum into doing that. So you mentioned that you'll do two movements on the max effort days on the Saturdays. Is that usually like either squat or deadlift and then bench, or how does that go for you?
Yeah, it'll be like a max effort upper movement and a max effort lower movement. So it'll be like Mars bar squat and then like a competition bench or like a safety squat bar and then like close grip. I've done overhead pressing, max effort movements, done incline. There's yeah, that's pretty much it. Incline. You have flat, and you have overhead, but then there's also the different types of bars. So it's like I'll mess around with whatever bars we have. Sometimes it's football bar, Swiss bar was fun to press overhead. So like I'd also like I have a log too. Like I'll do strongman. I haven't pulled it out in some time, but I'll do like log press too. Last time I pulled it out, I think I did a 415 strict press off it. So that's a pretty good log number.
Yeah, that's an impressive lift for sure. Um, when you do these max effort days, do you ever switch the order in which you do which lift, or do you kind of stick with?
Yeah, I'll switch it up. I was following for a time where it's just like if I was going to squat, that I would bench, and if I was going to deadlift, I was going to bench first. and then deadlift. But sometimes it just depends on like what equipment's available when I go in there. If I'm going in there and like all the racks are taken, it's like all right, I'll deadlift first. Or if it's like the squat bar is open like at that time and there's like other people and it's like oh I better get a hold of that before somebody else does and go ahead and do that first and then you know go from there.
Yeah. And on which days do you think that maybe, say, if you do deadlift first or bench first, or which one do you think kind of maybe affects you more going into the next one?
Um, Squats, like a heavy squat, seems to be the one that's the most brutal going in. If I cut it off and I don't really go to a full max, where it's just like, hey, there's nothing left after that, it's not too bad. But if I do like that, I did a 425 a couple months ago. That took a lot out of me, and like the rest of the training session wasn't that great. But like you need to do that sometimes. Like you need to get under there and push it or you're not going to get any better. So like I understand that. So it's like, hey, if we're going to do it that day, you might have to realize like, hey, it's not going to be competition bench as your next max effort movement for your upper body. It might be something like legs up, close grip, or a spoto press or something like that. Because you already know it's like you're not going to get something too good out of that training session because you're already so fatigued.
Yeah.
But I will say it kind of lends to going into a competition though,
Yep.
especially with this reach, how they're talking and USAPL, how quick the meets go. So it's like, hey, you're going to go into a meet and you're only going to have, 30 minutes before you have to do bench. So you might as well do it in training sometimes. So,
Yeah, you just stole the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna say that does like kind of precondition you to going into a competition. More into, I know you like to use the safety squat bar and the Mars bar, but maybe what are some of your other favorite movements for in terms of like secondary lifts or specialty bars?
secondary lifts. Uh, Usually for secondary lifts, I like box squats with the special bars a lot. I mean I like doing maxes with them too, but the secondary ones, I really like box squats a lot. For lower, I like what else is there? Wide stance, very slightly elevated deadlift with like a snatch kind of style grip. That's worked a long time. Uh, I like leg pressing quite a lot. Like a leg press seems to be one that's with all the safety squat bar work. Like I don't really worry about falling over, so the core doesn't need as much of taxing. And a lot of times it's just like, hey, after all that work, you just need to finish off your legs. So going under there and loading up that and doing like 10 sets of 10 or something like that to really blow up your legs. And I feel like that's worked a lot for me. For upper body, there's like plenty of them. I'll do pretty much any upper body movement that I would max. I would also do as like a back down, depending on like what it would be. So it's like I think like if I'm gonna need more like lockout, then it's like, hey, I've maxed out effort bands. I'll just do, back down 4 sets of 4 with like band work with legs up, close grip, or, anything like that. Safety or Smith, not Smith, my bad. I have done the Smith machine before. That's a good one too. But I was thinking Swiss bar, football bar, those kind of things. Those are all great tools too.
Yeah, I definitely am a huge fan of the football bar for triceps.
Hmm.
That bar is very humbling to me. The safety squat bar, I have a personal hatred for because of how humbling it is. My problem is not my core; it's my upper back, and that bar literally just folds me in half.
Hmm. So I got what you're saying with that. Then I did. I think my last time I squatted with it, it folded me over pretty good. But over a while, it's like I've gotten kind of used to working with it so much that it's just like, hey, this is just the normal feel for it. I feel like at my point for my upper back, it's not so much that it's going to fold over as much as like just having to hold the weight. That's what I noticed in that the 430 from the meet. It's like just having to support it there really trashed the upper back. I didn't really fall over on that 430, but it's just like supporting it really took a lot out of me. So I've been trying to look at things like heavy power rows, things like that. So this kind of work upper back, just overall strength, and because it seems like I've already hit the max from SSB. It's not more SSB work. I don't think it's going to be the answer now. So it's going to have to figure out what the other key is for that.
Yeah, so for me, I haven't had a chance to use the Mars bar before, but um, I just wanted to kind of know how different it is from the SSB and just like what it kind of, if you could describe how it feels to someone that's never used it.
So for the Mars bar, you got to think of it like it's a low bar safety squat bar, it's kind of in a way. And for me, it's like after getting used to all of them, it's like there was like a 100 to 50 to 100 pound difference between SSB and low bar, and then low bar there's like a 50 pound difference to Mars bar. It's kind of a best way to think of it is kind of like you're not going to fold over. It makes it so that the bar pushes it into your lower back, and all you're going to be focusing is driving with your legs. And you don't have to worry about, am I going to fall over? Am I going to need to work stability or anything like that? You just push with your legs. And it's kind of a way to just train your lower a little bit harder, kind of like you with let's talk with like the leg press, where it's just like with all the SSB work I'm doing, it's just like the legs need more work. So it's kind of like what the Mars bar is doing. It's just overloading your leg strength.
Yeah, so it's kind of like almost like the opposite of an SSB in a way.
Yep. Where it's just like it's going to lock you into position and all you got to do is push. Now, sometimes that position's a little bit awkward if it kind of sits or, and one of the problems I'll have is that I'll hit my elbows against my knees, and then that will be that'll toss me out of that position where force my ass up a little bit too much, and then it's over. But if you could maintain that position and just drive through, it's just like, hey, it's all just your leg strength.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a bar that's pretty cool to use. I do want to get a chance to use it at some point.
It's also really, really good for good mornings because it can just put all of the pressure on your glutes and hamstrings. You don't have to worry about like your core having to support the weight forward.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you're obviously in the middle of prep right now for the Rumble because I do have a meet that same day. So I'm obviously halfway through my prep. So maybe talk about what this prep's been like and maybe some of your goals going into it.
Oh man, this the prep's not been great, I could say. Coming off the meet I did in what was it, June or May, um, for what was it? I don't even remember the name of the meet. But coming off of that, I had like a lot of like life stuff. I took a vacation, had some time off. I've had like contractors here doing siding, so like life has kind of gotten a little bit of the best of me going into this. So focus hasn't really been able to switch on like it was in the for the last meet. But hopefully, I'm still able to hit the same numbers that I hit. I would like to maybe get 440 on squat. I think I could. That's maintainable because I stopped my first opening attempt in my last meet, and that kind of like threw off everything. So like 440, 435, 440 should be okay, which isn't too much of an increase. Hopefully bench the same, maybe a little bit more. Than deadlift, I'm just really hoping to hold on to the bar. So like I don't think I'm going to do much more than what I did in my last meet. Just with how training has been going, I would love to just hit those numbers again too, and just hold on to a dead. Um, to just kind of like, hey, hit a number this year, and then go from there and see what other people do. But it's not been as good as I would like it to be. So not to like be like it's not like a downer thing or anything. It's like it's just like it's like just what happens. So
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of talk about this as well, like how maybe for like a newer powerlifter or someone who's young in the game, that not every prep's going to go well, and you can't expect to necessarily, especially at your strength level, to hit
mhm,
PRs every single meet. And for something like this, that's a very different style and very fast paced meet. Obviously, you have to kind of expect the unexpected, and on top of that, like you said, you got to be able to balance your life on top of powerlifting because it is just a
yeah.
hobby.
So like there's been plenty of things that uh, that could stop you just from just even competing or just even doing powerlifting in general. So at least I could still go and train. It's like I didn't get an injury to, or not, nothing that's like going to stop me from being able to go and at least show up. So, but that's like I'm looking at like, hey, things might have not gone the greatest, and maybe got a couple of niggles here and there that are going to bother you, and maybe your hamstring, your glute, or something like that. But nothing that's going to stop me at least going and then putting up a total as long as I can hold on to something. I didn't think I was going to drop those deadlifts in my last meet either.
Yeah, so I guess with life outside of powerlifting or kind of your background in the military, obviously playing college sports, maybe what are some of the lessons or some things that you've learned that have helped you in powerlifting?
Oh, well, big ones for football is like, man, we would do, sometimes we'd put up like 40 points and we'd lose by 41 because of like extra points. So sometimes it's like, hey, you know, things are out of your control sometimes. So like kind of like with the life stuff, like, vacation and, things going on with your house or your work or stuff like that. That's like, hey, those are out of your control and you're gonna just have to deal with them. So you just gotta get used to getting pivots thrown at you or these things that you just gotta react to. And just don't worry too much about it, hey, because it's at the end of the day, it's a hobby. It's not like it's what's paying the bills.
Yeah, and I always say that, and it is just a hobby because unfortunately there's not a lot of power or not a lot of money in powerlifting, but maybe in the future that it'll be something that maybe some people can at least maybe just work a part time job to powerlift.
Yeah, it would be great. It would be cool for people to be able to do that. I think most of the people get the in powerlifting monies and coaching seems to be it. But I don't. It's I think there needs to be a little bit more unification in powerlifting to be able to do that, and
Agreed.
you know, the untested and the tested side that's causing a giant schism. That it's like strongman, you don't have that. It's just have strongman. So if we had something along those lines, then maybe uh, we're a bit farther out from there. But it would be cool to see in maybe the next 10, 20 years. But I'm sure people have been saying this since the '80s when, or I think the last live event I saw that was big. I think what was the Mountaineer Cup? Like Ed Cohn had the Mountaineers Cup on ESPN in like the 2000s. So it'd be cool if we could just get back to that.
Yeah, I don't really remember any. Well, I mean, I'm obviously kind of still new to powerlifting, but I feel like Raw hasn't really made it to obviously like national television or anything. But I do remember back in the day, like the WPO would be on ESPN, and that was kind of a big thing. And then that sort of kind of fell off. And
Mm-hmm.
although Multiply does seem to be making a pretty strong comeback, and the kind of unification of both being kind of just agreeing to like it and just be a part of the sport has definitely gotten better. But I do
Mm-hmm.
agree that unification in terms of like tons of feds and untested versus tested definitely is something that kind of puts a wrench in the plans to make it profitable.
Mm-hmm. But you can always dream, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what makes me so excited to see this Rumble is just the kind of the production aspect of it and kind of giving these lifters personalities, kind of like how Strongman does.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes Strongman so digestible to the outside world is obviously they get to do crazy things and crazy different movements, but highlighting their personalities almost like a WWE wrestler kind of makes the fun aspect of it rather than just watching someone squat, bench, and deadlift because unless you're in the sport of powerlifting, that's a pretty monotonous and boring thing to look at.
Yeah, and who'd you have on here? Was it last week or 2 weeks ago with the ABS?
Jay.
Yeah, Jay. Yeah, I watched that one, and he was talking about like, hey, you make it an event where it's like a backdrop to like a social gathering. So you've got like drinking, and you've got a pub thing going on. It's like that's like a good way to advertise it. So it's not like, hey, you don't have to just be interested in powerlifting. You can come along and watch these people do these big lifts while also doing something that you're going to do anyway. It's like going to the bar to watch a football game or going watching literally anything. But the backdrop is football, and that's a good way. Or the backdrop is powerlifting, which is a good way to try to maybe bring it to the masses, where it's just like, hey, you don't have to care so much about powerlifting, just like enjoy watching the people every now and then while you're there already socializing with your friends. So I think that's like a good direction to go with this.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see what it kind of grows into over the next few years. But I guess maybe for you, I know you said you don't have a coach, but going to this meet, maybe who you're traveling with, do you have any training partners or do you have like a handler? Like, what's your plan for that?
No, I'm just going to show up and pretty much load weight on the bar and squat, bench, deadlift, do it how I've been doing it for like the last 2 or 3 years. So it'd be cool though, but it's like I don't have anybody to like that. I'm not gonna like pretty much push that on to somebody. So that's like, hey, you're gonna be the one to do this, like that. It's, you just treat it as like any other day that you're going to do a max effort movement. Like, hey, you got to load the weight onto the bar yourself at during training, so not that big deal if you have to do it in a meet.
Yeah. So maybe just tell everybody where you train out of.
I train out of Dan Campos Fitness, which is right over there in Philadelphia area, and then the secondary one is King of Gains Fitness, the gym that just opened up down in Cinnaminson area of New Jersey. So both of those are pretty good gyms to go check out.
So if you kind of could think about maybe over the career in powerlifting, or even just kind of watching powerlifting, maybe early on, maybe what are some of your favorite moments or some of your favorite people that have influenced you?
The biggest influence I even remember what got me into strength sports was I was in Virginia in Chincoteague Island, and I think I was like 7 to 10 or something along the line. And they had World's Strongest Man on TV, and Mariusz Pudzianowski, and that dude, you just watching him pull. I think it was they were pulling a box car, and when he was going along the pool, when he got to the final one, like they had like this ladder that they were using, and you probably remember, like a lot of people remember if they're strongman fan, he rips the ladder out of the bracket
Mm-hmm.
after he's done like pulling, and I'm like, man, that's what I want to do. So like Mariusz Pudzianowski was a big influence in wanting to get into strength sports, and then like Bill Kazmaier was great to watch. A lot of them, and he also has like the strongman and powerlifting background too. Uh, who else is there? A lot of the multiply guys. Ryan Kennelly when
Yep.
doing those bench years when he's doing like the 1075 or 1074 stuff like that. That really always pumped me up in the 2000s. Uh, that rivalry between him and Scott, and then I think there was Gene Regovich, or was it?
Route check.
Yeah, Bralchak. I think he's from Jersey too,
I'm
or
not.
from this area. I
So
thought.
it's somewhere up here, but that's funny that you just mentioned his name. I think my gym's actually getting the bench that he hit 1,000 on.
Oh, sick. So that's like he was a big one. A lot of the multiply bench guys were big in the day. And then I wasn't really too excited about a lot of the squatting and the deadlifting, but it was always the bench for me. That was a cool one to watch. And then kind of like later on, like when Ray was doing his thing in the 2000 or the 2010 to 20 in that area, like that was always fun to see him. Like, man, it's like this guy's squatting 1070. It's like who else is doing that? Nobody. So
Yeah,
that was a big influence to kind of keep it going while doing the whole army thing, and knowing that I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be able to train like that to get to that level, but it's cool to watch. And I honestly never thought I'd be like getting close to.
yeah. So it seems like you do have like a lot of influence in strongman. Have you ever competed in strongman?
Yeah, I've done I did a local meet once, and then I've done the what is it? What's that called? The Static Monsters competition, where it's like a log press and 18-minute deadlift. I've been wanting to get into it more, but it's like, what do you want to just kind of spin your wheels at doing like these local ones, or do you want to try to get into like World's Strongest Man, Giants Live, and that's kind of the direction I would like to go if I ever got into it. So talking with some of the guys in Strongman, it seems like you got to go. OSG would take you to Giants, would take you to World's Strongest Man, and that seems to be the path. And I've thought about maybe doing the online qualifier to do OSG in December. I think I might try to do that still. We'll have to see. So it depends on if, like, training wasn't going, like we were talking about, training wasn't going that great for getting into the Rumble. So it's like, hey, do I want to take time off and try to do that too? So maybe it's like another year of like just put it on the back burner. And the nice thing about strongman though is like, hey, you had Mark Felix, and when did Mark Felix start? 37, pretty sure. So it's like you got plenty of time for that. Just got to figure out an event you're really good at, and then you'll stick around for a long time.
Yeah. And if you had to guess, or maybe just from your experience, do you think it's easier for a strong powerlifter to go into strongman or vice versa?
Uh, hard to say. I would say it's depending on if you've already had like a good background in moving, then it's probably easier for like a strong powerlifter to go into strongman if you already have a background in like doing like movement, like wrestling and football and all that kind of stuff, like we were talking about. Like you'll pick that kind of stuff up pretty quickly. I will say it's probably harder for like just a strong power lifter that hasn't done anything like that because you're already kind of like not knowing how to move, and then powerlifting already makes you more immobile to begin with.
Yeah.
For strongman, it would depend like what kind of strongman, because you have a lot of those guys that are like, hey, you're either the really quick and good on implements kind of guy, or you're like the power guy like Zadrunas Savekis. It's like, oh, he's just gonna power through everything. You're not gonna beat him with all the movement events because he just did so well and taking first on all these other ones.
Yeah.
So like that kind of guy would go well into powerlifting, but I don't know if the guy that's kind of like doing the doing the fastest yoke walks or doing the fastest farmers carries are going to go into powerlifting that well. I mean, and this is obviously, they'll translate into it that if they're like a super athlete, they're going to do well eventually. It's just like, how long is it going to take them to get to the same level, pretty much?
Yeah, and I think the difference too is obviously strongman. You need unique implements like logs and
Hmm.
Husafell stones, and all that crazy shit. But powerlifting, you can technically go to your local Y and become a powerlifter. So I think that difference in accessibility is definitely a huge factor too.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's like I've lifted. I didn't start going to like a private powerlifting gym till after COVID in 2021. Like all that other training during the army was all. I mean, football training, we had a great gym and all that, but that was forever ago at that point. But after all those years in the army, they were just like normal army gyms where it's like you got like the Iron Mind powerlifting. I mean, the Iron Mind power bar that's like rated for like 500 pounds, those kind of things, and whipping all over the place. I did notice that going to a dedicated powerlifting gym did spike the numbers a lot. Like you don't have to worry about bar whip, like and all that kind of stuff, and you can just it's more. It's kind of like going from like the safety squat bar to the Mars bar was kind of like a good way to explain it. Like going from those basically like earthquake bars to like a real power bar. It's just like, hey, now you can just focus on building up your leg strength instead of having to control it. If it's going like this
Yeah, and
with,
that
with
that
only like 700 pounds.
yeah, that was I kind of experienced that a little bit just with I was training at the Y for I don't know 6 years, and I've been training
Mhm.
for what 8 or something like that now, and like it was starting to get to a point where I wasn't comfortable squatting there because the bar would whip so much, and I'm not
Mhm.
gonna trust some 4-year-old dad to be spotting me on like 600 pounds. So yeah, I definitely get that.
Oh yeah, that's one of those ones where I'm like, hey, if if you're gonna squat heavy and you're not got 5 people to squat for me, it's like I don't have 5 people. It's like it's safer just to dump the bar than try to have someone spot you on the side. I really wish I could squat in cages because then I just dump it on the like you wouldn't have to worry about anybody, just dump it on the rack. But with my bad mobility, I actually the only way I can low bar squat is in one of the combo racks. Now I've seen these cool things, and there's a company that they sent where it's like it comes out and then you can hook the J hooks to here, so you can have a wide grip in a power cage. But they're like $400, and I'm like, I've almost spent $400 on those. Cool idea though. Wish more places did it.
Yeah, and I did see. I think it was the before when you took 1,000 on the Mars bar, but missed it, and I was like, this should be an ad for those safety straps because
Yeah.
if they can hold that, then I wouldn't be worried about anything I'm squatting.
Hmm. Yeah, those straps are pretty good. I've dumped plenty of plenty of squat on those straps, safety squat bars, bars bar, whatever.
Is there any reason that you don't use spotters, or is it just a person availability thing?
It's availability. So I usually go and get there about like 7 o'clock. And so we were talking earlier about like availability. Sometimes like I've done earlier when there's nothing available, but I like to usually go later when everything is available. Um, but then you run into the problem where you got like 100-pound bodybuilder girl and guy that's just there for general fitness. It's like I'm not gonna try to get them to squat in a spot a 900-pound squat. So it's like, yeah, no, if we go down, we're going down.
Yeah, so I think we can kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my last question. If you could give a new powerlifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would that be?
For a new powerlifter, I would just say try things. Just go in and experiment, try different programs. Because just because you tried your first one, you had progress on, doesn't mean that something else isn't gonna work a little bit better for you. So don't be afraid to experiment doing different things. Going into your first meet, I'd say lift to standard. People forget commands. Have somebody just do a mock meet with you, where it's like you got start, stop, all that kind of stuff. That's probably be mine because like I'll spot for the USAPL meet the local ones at stand, and you'll have people like forgetting to wait for the rack command or wait for the down command, and you're like, I'm usually the back spotter. I'm like, wait for the command, don't go in. So try to remember do all those commands. And then, yeah, standard. Film yourself. Film yourself. It's like everybody's got a camera nowadays on your phone, so you might as well get a tripod. And people talk about the tripod kids and all that, but like, hey, the best way to figure something out is to watch it instead of trying to explain it online. Or because if you have the film, then you can ask somebody like reach out to me, reach out to your favorite powerlifter, and if they're willing to look at it, you can at least find out, hey, what's going on with something because if you have the film easy to see instead of having to try to explain it in words and confuse people. So you might as well film stuff. So lift the standard, film stuff, and don't be afraid to experiment to summarize stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I definitely think it's important and valuable for someone kind of new to the game to be like a sponge and absorb things, learn new things, and kind of get to figure out what works best for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
No problem. No problem.